Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show, a weekly show designed for you as a leader and manager to get the results you've always wanted. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show so you can never miss an episode and share it with anyone else who might get the benefit. Right, without any more delay, let's get on with this week's show. Welcome back to this week's Manager Matt show. Hope you're all well and getting the results you want in your home and work life. Well, today I want to talk about moving people to act. And I think this is one of the key parts of anybody's job as a manager, is to get people to do things that sometimes they might not be keen on doing. I'm not talking about anything illegal in that statement. I meant actually getting them to do the job that they're to do. And a leader and a manager has that as part of his remit. And moving people to obviously get there involves a lot of creating connections. It involves trying to influence. It's around passion for what you're doing. It's around getting things done. Obviously, delivering results is a big part of what I say, but it's about that impact. So there's lots of points that you need to consider as a manager when you start looking at how you get people to do those things. If we start going around the idea of what do you want out of it, what are you really getting to? Well, a lot of the time it's around, you as a person having a presence. So, you as a communicator, you need to resonate and be able to connect to people. And that's really important. The communication side of our jobs is massive. What we do day to day, when we're talking to people, when we're interacting them, not just in the getting the jobs delivered, but just in being a person. But that idea of being present, so listening to people, understanding them, asking questions is an important part of getting them to act and engaging with them, making sure that you are closing the laptop down, shutting the phone off, having time to talk to people and being present around that idea of communicating. So first thing when you're looking at how to connect and get people to deliver is how are you presenting yourself? How are you communicating yourself to the individuals or to the group when it comes to getting the message across and also making sure that they can do what they do. And around that, being present is obviously making sure that you are caring, genuinely caring around the people you do. Even in a military situation where, or a special rescue sort of medical or fire, they have to put people in dangerous situations. And even as leaders, you're going to put them there, but you still care. You still want them to be well in themselves. So choosing to be present, making sure you're engaging is the main part of this communication. So good communication skills, good connections with people will help get your message over. Also making sure that you have a humility, a human side to what you're doing. Because, a lot of the time, as strong action-based leaders, which we can be, this can be a real barrier to the humility that you need as a leader. Because obviously you're going out there, you can be sometimes as a leader come over as being too confident. You can be very fast in your decision making because you sometimes have a lot more information, and that can come over as really not caring and really be a barrier to that idea of being a human and having humility. I know you can get things done faster that way. In your own mind, when you're talking about delivering, you might be the expert, so you might want to go there, make the decisions. But of course, by doing that, you can then cause your own problems because, you yourself are being a strong, action-driven person, and you forget that the humility you'll need to get others to come along with you are quite over the top and gone. And of course, sometimes people who are like that, who are very good at getting things done and delivering results, can be afraid to let go of control and let things go. And I think my last cast we spoke about delegation quite heavily and how you delegate, and this is another trap that people can fall into when they don't delegate well. This idea of being too confident, over the top, very fast at getting decisions can trample others. And around the idea of being a humility as a leader, and getting them to do the results you want, you need to make sure that you let others shine. And that means stepping away, connecting people, moving more from the direct approach which you're used to a more coaching approach. That's very important. Move away from just telling to coaching and asking others to share their ideas, genuinely getting the people involved in this and gets things, to get the right things done at the right time. And it can always feel sometimes clunky when you're first doing this, because you are a person who's always got things done and you want to give it away, but have that humility to be able to step back, start to coach, let people know, be aware of others' strengths. It goes back to my basic 5 of knowing the people you work for, knowing in their selves what their strengths are, what they are good at doing, so that you can be aware of people around your strengths. And when you are delegating them and giving them those actions to create, then they're aware, or you're aware of their strengths. You also show your vulnerability sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have a lot of strengths, but sometimes you can be vulnerable and ask people, well, how do you do this? I don't know, because you're not all experts at everything. So that's a really good point when it comes to having a human touch. And of course, don't always have the right answers. I know that sounds a bit strange. You've been coached as a leader to, make sure that you have all the answers. You're expected to know the answers to your boss. But, you should have a style that moves away from that. You can become the idea of a servant leader. You're serving the people around you to clear the path, you'll heard me said before. To stop and look in the mirror and say, well, am I taking over? Am I doing this? That's part of humility, of being able to step around and leave others to lead themselves. And of course, empowering them to do that. So allowing them to make mistakes, allowing them to get things wrong sometimes within a boundary, is a good example of a leader who is moving people to act. That's not always telling them exactly what to do. I think I very rarely tell my team exactly what to do, or the teams I've led, because they know what the end goal is. You've established where you want the people to get to. You have given them the KPIs you're going to measure. So you go and let them do what they do. And if they come into your office with those, you know when this is working well, when they come into your office and go, Matt, or obviously what your name is, I intend to do this, or I think this is the best way forward. And that merely fills you with a confidence that you've done the right things. And from that, you get impact. You're getting this impact. They're aligned to what you are wanting. You've given them some clear results. You've made sure that they are aligned to what you and the business needs, so that when you're being a human and you're having this humility and you've given them the empowerment, they know that the impact they are making will end in some great results for you and a business. And that's the first part of when we talk about moving people to act. Also, the idea of having a character. I know, and you probably do as listeners, that you're much more likely to follow a person who has a style, something who is authentic and concerned, but has a character, someone who maybe has a confidence about them, and not in an arrogant or an egotistical way, but has a confidence to carry themselves and to carry the business forward. They can inspire you to act. I think I've been inspired definitely a number of times by leaders who I went a lot further than I would have normally done, because there was a character there. And I'm not talking about a false character. When we talk character, sometimes we think of actors. People play a part when they go to work. That's not the idea of character. The idea of character is to have that genuineness, and you're curious about that person. You want them to be good. You want them to be successful. You want to be part of the process. So you can definitely get yourself around a person with a character, and of course, be the character. If you are the leader, think to yourself, am I a character? Do I resonate right? Do I come over as someone who can get things done, that you can connect with others, that you get the connections and the important connections right? That idea of you develop a presence and a character, and that is all around having the head and the hearts and the hands, they say. If you can develop these skills so that when you're there, you have your head of what you're thinking, you have your heart of what you're feeling, and if your hands are what you're going to do. And if you can get those and people see those and they can really rally behind you, then there's nothing you can do as a leader wrong. You can push it forward, you can make things happen, because people feel that with the head, the heart and the hands, that they're in a good place. And if you just take a second now and think about a good manager you've been with, you'd say they were clever, they were passionate, they could get things done. And that is exactly around this idea of resonance and this idea of having a head and a heart and hands. And of course, if you think of poor managers you've worked with, they usually do things like, oh, he's thick, or they're thick, gosh, they don't give a monkeys why they're here, flipping hell, I could have done that job easier than him. Those are the negative connotations when you don't deliver the head and the heart and the hands. So very important that you've got your character and you're looking at characters you work for, but you're also making sure that you've got this resonance that you're delivering to the people. And another part of being a manager who's getting people to move and act and creating this connection and compassion is exactly that, the idea of compassion. And compassion is where people get a little bit mixed up. They think compassion's all around, cups of tea and incense burning and calm music and meditation. It's not. Compassion is you being yourself. Compassion is around integrity, obviously, but also compassion's around having a resilience. Be able to face up and have courage to say that's wrong as a leader. There is the idea of having compassion for others, that's sometimes going against the grain and saying what's right, even though it may do you wrong, reflects as good leadership. You think of all the great leaders in the world when they've had to go and follow that person to somewhere that they're risking themselves, back to the idea of a war or a battle. You're going to be following someone and you could potentially die. If that person doesn't come over as someone who has integrity and has cares, they're not going to go right far. They're not going to be followed. Fear can only get people so far. Compassion and the idea of integrity will take people a lot further. And it sort of intertwines with emotional intelligence. Are we aware of being humans, having this confidence in a self that I can be compassionate, I can lead people in a compassionate way. Yes, I'm going to deliver results. Yes, I'm going to do what I need to do to win. That's nothing wrong with that. That shows your courage and resilience. But you have the intelligence that you need others with you. You have the compassion for others. You focus rather on this person. So if you're focusing not on yourself, but on the person that you're working with, you're again back to the idea of being a manager who can be a servant leader. They're the people who can take a back seat, let others shine, but also be able to guide and get people going in the right direction. And from that, when we talk about it not all being rainbows and unicorns, there's also the concept of being honest and having honest conversations, because compassion means being honest with people. And compassion means having a difficult conversation with someone who may be underperforming. When we talk about feedback, that's all what it's about. It's not to be nasty. It's not to give someone a dressing down. It's around having an idea of getting that person to improve. And there's a concept around radical candour, where you look at personal care versus a challenge and direction. And it says that you should, as much as possible, give that person the honest feedback they need. Don't be quiet and silent. Don't expect it just to disappear. Don't be arrogant about it and use it as a power trip, but give someone honest feedback. If you got that honest feedback, then you can go far. Some people may not be able to take that honest candour. They may struggle with that. But if you've built good relationships, you understand the person and they understand you're doing it to be compassionate for that person, then they can soon realise that you giving them this radical candour, getting them to have the good honest feedbacks, will help them improve. There's nothing worse than people who are silent, and there's nothing worse than people who don't say anything, because what will happen over time is that the people who are good will leave because they feel that they're not being utilised, or they're underappreciated, or for a number of reasons. And the other people will get worse, because if you don't correct them and make those small mid-course corrections, before you know it, you're a mile away from where you need to be. And it all comes back to the idea of moving people forward and creating those connections. So let's just recap a few of the points I've covered there. There's a case for humility and being a leader who allows others to shine when you're trying to motivate. There's also around impact. You need to know that people know where they're going, that they know the results, that they are being told what is expected of them. There's this idea of not being too strong an action person, because your action bias can barrier others to humility, so be aware of that. When it comes down to being present and making sure you're communicating in the right way, leading through your character and your resonance, leading with this idea of your head and your heart and your mind at the forefront of what you do. And of course, the last part I've just spoke around, having compassion for your people, putting others in front of you, but also making sure that you're resilient, you understand emotional intelligence, and you give people radical feedback, radical candor feedback, so that there is no surprises. And that gives a little bit of an overview around my ideas around moving people forward and acting in the right way to create the results that you want. Now, that comes to the end of the show, and as ever, as I always say at the end of the shows, please send me some feedback on the show or on other shows you've listened to. I'm always keen to take it, as feedback is a gift. You can get me at managermattpodcasts@gmail.com. I'm always interested to engage in new and old topics. Also, if you haven't already, rate the show. So go into iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get it, for wherever around the world, because we've got some great listeners all over the world. Rate the show, just helps people find us and tries to push it on. This is there for people to learn and hopefully learn from me and my experiences. So I'd love more people to engage on it. And of course, whatever you've heard today, please try and act on it. When you're faced with how you move people forward to act, think around the things I've spoke today, because there's no point in listening if you don't just put it into action. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thanks as ever for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.